An international cricket journalist for 10 years. I tell you what, I have got a collection of international SIM cards that I will never truly understand. Now I find there is a company called Sally who gives you an eSIM, and it makes it all so much easier. So if you're planning on making any trips, download your Sally eSIM app, and you can also get a 15% discount if you say good areas, all one word, at checkout. Travel like a pro with your Sally eSIM today. Welcome to Good Areas Live. This is the Wagon Wheel, the podcast where I answer your questions on cricket. If you want to ask those questions and you're in the YouTube at the moment, a bit of a weird time, but I'm currently, might be, for those actually watching on YouTube, I've got a pop filter in front of my microphone, and that is there because I'm doing my audiobook of The Art of Batting, available on the 8th of May. So if you like audiobooks, it will be available on the 8th of May, I assume. I mean, I don't know, it might take me that long to actually record it, but I've got the pop filter up at the moment, so we're working on that. So if you are in the YouTube and you want to ask a question, Super Chat, always the best way to go. If not, you can always support us on Patreon. Good Areas podcast over there, like Neil has. And he's asked a question, which is, thoughts on Akash Deep, the bowler? Was really unlucky during the Border Gavaskar Trophy. Was he really unlucky during the Border Gavaskar Trophy? Or just fractionally too short and lacking that extra zip? I've read Kartikeya Date liking him to Stuart Broad based on ball tracking. Really? Wouldn't he be about a foot shorter than Stuart Broad? Like, I can't imagine that their release points are very similar at all. I still think he's a good bowler. I wouldn't throw him away because he didn't take wickets in one series. I've seen enough of him to think that he's a test quality bowler. He might be not quite ready to be like a first, like in your first three best options. But I think it'd be silly to not keep him around for a little bit longer. He looks fairly talented to me, Neil, based on what I've seen. But I'm also not raving about him. I don't think he'll ever be a star. But I can see him being a really good bowler. Adityan says, when you say Australia didn't let Cummins play any... when you say Australia didn't let Cummins play any cricket all those years, how literally do you mean it? Not even BBL. What was his training regimen like in that period? And why not do something similar with Jai, who is getting injured every time he sneezes? I think with Pat Cummins, they thought they had potentially the best bowler in the world. They also had Stark, Hazelwood, Pattinson, Siddle. I think who else was around at that stage. Was Mitchell Johnson still around? Yeah, he would have been, wouldn't he? So Mitchell Johnson would have been around. Ryan Harris was around. And I think at that stage, they thought that I think they also thought they'd made it a bit of a mistake. I think he could have played some T20 games. I don't think he would have been able to play much cricket, though. It really did take a long time for him to come back. They'd also had some other players, too, like, Bert Cockley is probably a good example of someone who they didn't really look after and then they got nothing out of at all. So they probably went overly preventative with Pat Cummins. I don't know how much he played a role in it. Or, his manager, Neil Maxwell's quite an important person as well. Like, I don't know what the full story was. What I remember, and I'm trying to remember what year I met him, 2012. So he hadn't been injured that long. But he was doing heaps of running on like a weightless running machine. So I never saw it. So, but I think it's the one with the harnesses. So he was doing the cardio. It's like I suppose it's like replicating running in a swimming pool, except you can do it faster. So I think the problem with running in a swimming pool is you can't actually get your cardio ever that high, right? Because I could be wrong, just because it's hard and your feet slip on the bottom and everything else. Where I think, so he did a lot of that. Why would they not do it with Jai Richardson? Jai Richardson's a man, and I think the other issue with Pat Cummins is he was a boy, and that has happened with it. Jai Richardson also has had multiple different injuries, is my memory of Jai Richardson, right? Whereas I think with Pat Cummins, it was the one injury, they wanted it to be fixed. But I remember that period as them being really protective. I think they've backed off that a little bit now. Ian says, due to the qualifying period to be eligible and then fall out at the end. Due to the qualifying period to be eligible and then to fall out at the end. KP's England Test career only lasted 9 years and 104 tests. If he starts earlier and doesn't have the fallout, how close does he get to Cook and even Root? Um, I assume you mean in terms of runs, or if you mean in terms of overall legacy. I don't know. 104 tests is still so many tests. It just tells you how many England actually play. So it's not like he was robbed of tests, but he was certainly robbed of years. If he has a full, it's so hard because he is a South African batter. Like, I know he's not like traditional South African batters, but he is at least partly made. So you need him to have come from South Africa to be the player he was. The same with Jonathan Trott. But yeah, he probably would have played 140, 145 tests. He was a bit of a slow player. If he was an England player and he wasn't his personality, he gets at least another 20 tests at the end, doesn't he? I would have thought. But also T20 cricket was coming and everything out. It's a really hard one to ask, Ian. It's not a bad question. I'm not sure I have a great answer. But yeah, he probably plays another 35 tests, I would have thought. Bloody Bugger says, how come only Australia no-balled Muralitharan? If one country was going to make a fuss about throwing, you'd think it would be England, home of the MCC, obsession with spirit of cricket, blah, blah, blah. Australia has always been the harshest country when it has come to chuckers, including their own, right? At the same time that Murali was gone, I don't think anyone really knows this story, and I've hinted at it before. But there's a guy called Troy Corbett out of South Australia who... Sorry, out of Victoria. What am I saying? Now lives in South Australia, I think. But I think he's from the border region, if I remember correctly. So one of those people who could have gone from either place, like Jamie Siddons or Andrew McDonald. He had a bowling average in list A cricket of like 11, right? He didn't play that much. Maybe it was 10, 15, 20 games. It wasn't a lot. They didn't test him. They didn't check. He was gone. Ian Metcalf. His book is called Thrown Out. And, you know, he talks a lot about not being backed by people within Australian cricket. And if I remember correctly, when he was called, Richie Benaud didn't do what Ajana Natunga had done, and what a lot of other captains had done before, is just take the bowler to the other end to see what happens then. So, Australia, when I grew up, everyone was a chucker. Like, in club cricket, there would be brawls about this all the time. In the nets, there would be brawls about this. Like some batters who bowled. So Australia was always the most obsessed with the actions. So I'm not at all surprised that Australia was the place. England have had some issues with it, but I don't think there's certainly never been anywhere near as didactic as Australia. And in my entire life of following cricket, I can't think of another nation that even comes close to how much Australia obsesses over it. So I think that was the big reason why. And then it was obviously other countries might have eventually called Murali, but it was kind of taken out of their hands around that point, right? Like it became a very different situation. KG says, can you compare cricket's auction system to American draft? What are the pros and cons of each? Look, I've talked about it a lot. The problem with the auction is that if you come last, there's no advantage at all. So it's very hard to make the league more even. Whereas the whole idea of the draft is kind of that, right? That you get to a point, with the draft where you are, there are issues with it, like tanking teams and everything else. Although, as we've seen with the NBA of recent times, you can kind of mitigate that a little bit. Although, not 100%, but certainly there's less tanking now than there was 5 years ago. So there are things that you can do to be able to mitigate that. But what it does is it means like when a season comes to the end for an IPL team who can't make the playoffs, other than giving experience to players, there's no reason for the games to continue. There is nothing on the line, right? Like it doesn't matter if you come fifth. Oh, is fifth the right answer? You know, it doesn't matter if you come fifth or sixth or 10th. You're still in the same place. So you could lose out on playoffs because of net run rate, right? And you're in the same position. So that's the big issue with an auction system. It doesn't actually help. I think the other thing an auction system does is, and players have now proven this, and we've been talking about it for years, it's taking the IPL a little longer to catch up, but players just game the system, right? They know that if you're in the mega auction, your price is going to be deflated, and then if you make yourself available after that, you can get a bigger amount. Like overseas players just gaming the system, meaning that they get overpaid and then they get overhyped. It's not an effective way of working out how much money you want to allocate to things. I also don't think, especially with the Indian players, but I would say this with international players as well. These players are building this league. They deserve, once they have put time and effort in KG, to decide which teams they play for, right? If they want to, I don't know, let's think of a good player here. Boovy. Let's say Boovy, actually, would that work? Sandeep Sharma. Sandeep Sharma might be a really good one. Let's say he gets offered 500k, right, to play for Rajasthan, and he gets offered 600k to play for Gujarat, right? The Rajasthan offer, he might be using the new ball and bowling it to death. The Gujarat offer, that he might be second choice new ball bowler, bowling a little bit in the middle and a little bit at the death. At the moment, he does not get to pick which team he wants to go to. Sandeep Sharma's played for what? 9 years? Like at this stage, he has played for enough teams, he's earned his stripes. So that's another issue for me. There's no player empowerment. And obviously in American sports, sometimes player empowerment can go too far. But these are the people who build this league, right? This is why it's popular. The other thing I don't like is it takes away the younger player excitement. So if you look at an auction, you know, you might get a young kid who goes for a bit of money, but he's never going to go for the highest amount of money. It's always going to be some old overseas player or some Indian player who's changing teams, right? Whereas if you have an auction for younger players, you can build up information about those younger players and we can start to talk about them a little bit more. The way I look at it also is, why have one auction when you can have a draft for younger players? So let's say under 23. You can have a draft for capped players, right? International, however you want to deal with that, the word capped. And then you can have free agency. That means you're controlling the media narrative. That's one of the things the IPL does not do. It controls the media narrative for basically 2.5 to 3 months. Whereas if you had these other things, you could build up and down to them. You could have them at different times of the year. I think that's a really important thing for a sporting league. What do I like about the auction? The players get paid a lot of money. Sometimes it's too much and it becomes an issue, but I do like that. And I like the fact that if there are only 2 teams who want that player is going to cash in on that, right? In a way that would never happen in an auction. Of course, as I've said before, if it was done correctly, that wouldn't be an issue. Sam says, how much does your studio take inspiration from Zoltz's famed bugle shed? Do you know, I've dropped Zoltzman off at his house many times. I don't think I've actually ever been in the bugle shed. I feel like I know it, but I don't think I've ever been in there. When we started recording together, I think we did it at my old house. And he was talking up the idea of separating your work from your home. And I had an office at that stage that was kind of in the middle of the house a little bit more. So I was always in the back of my mind, but in those days, I just was looking for an office. So it wasn't quite the same thing. Once we started professionalizing, it's really more about the fact that I can turn this into 4 different spaces, right? So we've only really got 2 of those spaces working at the moment. But eventually we can make this into 4 separate spaces, which I was never going to be able to do in the shape of the room I had before, or the size of the room I had before. So I always wanted a specialist space. So no, piss off, Zoltzman. By the way, I tried to buy a Andy Zoltzman tea towel the other day because people sell them. And this is how much these algorithms work. I sent him a WhatsApp and we were chatting about some nonsense. And then the next day, Instagram sent me a message going, would you like to buy the Andy Zoltzman tea towel? And it turned out I did want to buy the Andy Zoltzman tea towel, but it was sold out. MF Jim says, how has Jofra Archer's injury affected him? Has it changed his action or taken away confidence? There's been a bit of talk about different things, and it just looks like he's floaty and not hitting lengths. My guess is that, well, not my guess. The big advantage he had was that sort of Glenn McGrath, Courtney Walsh-like snap. That when he came down, he had this extra energy that he could impart on the ball on top of the arm speed, right? Which he was already really good at. It feels like through the elbow, and everything else. He doesn't have that. It could also be that he was hyperextending his arm like Jasprit Bumrah does, and like a lot of seamers do, but certainly those two come to mind. He might not be able to hyperextend his arm anymore. So I used to have a double jointed, it's not going to work on this video, is it? But I used to have a double jointed arm on this side, or on both sides, right? And since my injury, and it's a very different injury to his, but since my injury, I'll never be able, I can't even straighten my arm, right? Like the elbows are particularly, this is what I was told when I had my accident. Elbows don't come back. So it's possible now he's just bowling like a mortal, and before he wasn't. I would say that's probably the biggest change. Rob says, what are your thoughts and advanced stats on David Miller? He seems to come in 1 wicket too late to me. And he could be more impactful with more time at the crease. Not as bad as Klusener, but similar. I think what happened with him was for a long time he played spin horribly, Rob. So you wanted him to come in around that 13, 14 over mark. He's changed as a player now, but there aren't that many players who are good at the 14 over mark onwards innings, and he is definitely one of them. But I think because he's changed as a player, you could make an argument that over time he should have batted higher, and I think he has. I think when was it Gujarat who were using him slightly higher, or whoever he played for before then, and at the time I was like, oh, I'm not sure that's the way I want to go. Whereas now I look at it and I'm like, oh, I get this. This is not a bad idea at all. So I think now he's a different player, and you have to make that adjustment. Rob says, I remember in the late 90s and early 2000s, commentators slagging Shaun Pollock because some of his deliveries had wobble seam rather than not perfectly angled seam. Turns out he was bowling a wobble ball. What are some current examples of commentators just not staying up to speed with current tactics? That's not what Shaun Pollock was doing. I haven't quite talked to Shaun about this, but I'm pretty sure that what was happening to Shaun Pollock was the same thing that was happening to Courtney Walsh. Tim Murter is another one. Kate Cross is another one, which is they have what we would call an unintentional wobble ball. I could be wrong. I haven't heard Shaun say that he was doing it intentionally because he actually had a perfect seam when he wanted to. So with Tim Murter, what he told me was he would bowl like 5 perfect outswingers in a row, and then something would go wrong in his action, and that was the one that would jumble up, and quite often that would seam back. And he never understood how he did it, what was happening or anything else, but he just thought to himself, this is working, so I'm going to keep doing it. Look, the whole wobble ball, all the commentators have been behind on that, right? Like, I would say now there are still commentators who'd say I'm overly obsessed with it, and then it's not a thing. In fact, I've been told that by bowlers before, and they will often say things like this, but Shaun Pollock had one, and Courtney Walsh had one. And they're the two most famous versions of it that I usually hear. And I was like, yeah, but they didn't really know what they were doing, and they couldn't teach it to other people. And people were still bowling swing bowling back then. And people were still bowling dead seam straight up. That's not what's happening now. I think you get it with you still see T20 games where someone hits a 6 in a good matchup and they hit a single next ball, and the commentator says, clever cricket, right? So, reverse sweeps are risky, right? All these sorts of things that we see. One of the big ones, I remember all the spinners saying to me, and not the spinners, modern captains and even modern coaches going, there's a reason we keep long on and long off back. And it's because we think there is a risk in a player using their feet to come down the wicket and hit a single. And we're okay with that, right? Because we still think there is a risk. There wasn't a risk 20 years ago when players did it really easily, but spinners are quicker and people don't use their feet as much anymore. So we think that's worth it. We also think that having long on and long off out won't stop anyone playing big shots, right? Which it used to. Those are the ones off the top of my head, Rob, that I can think of. Anyway, let us have a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment for more Wagon Wheel. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favorite newspaper, head to Cricket Info, and maybe a blog you'd like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. Menon Shah says, what patterns are you looking for when betting? What are some specific things you never bet on and things that you're always on the lookout for? So I mostly bet on Betfair Exchange. So the vast majority of my bets are on the game. I'm looking for signs that the ball is coming on well or not coming on well. I'm looking for swing. I'm looking for seam. I'm looking for grip for slower balls. I'm looking for patterns within the game where matchups might float in my direction. What else am I looking for? I'm looking a couple of things that I really like. Well, actually, the one that I like because I think I can pick it more than anyone else is the softball. So when the steam has gone out of the ball, the air's gone out of the ball, I'm pretty good at that. Another one I'm very good at is the LBWs. I missed out terrible one in the last over of the game a day and a half ago or 2 days ago, a day back, when it was obvious that the number 11 wasn't out, but the market thought he was. Was it Mohit Sharma, I think, was number 11? It was clear the ball was spinning past. It was just that the camera was on a side angle. I'm very good at picking those sorts of things up. Also, I'm just looking for general patterns of is there a reason why this chase will be hard or easy, right? Is there a period why this part of the game, this team's going to try one thing or another? Those are the major things I'm looking for. As far as never betting, I don't bet with the bookies because they just shadow ban my account straight away. So anything to do with, man of the match and all that sort of stuff, it's just not worth it. Person McPerson Face says, reading Overthrowing Cricket's Empire and thoroughly enjoying it. Thank you very much. In the New Zealand section, you mentioned a Julian Khan who paid players throughout the world to play in his backyard because he was rich and he could pay players. When was the most recent case of a rich person getting some cricketers for ad hoc matches? Given how poorly paid cricketers can be, I assume it went well past the 1930s. It's still happening now. Now, America is the main place. America would be the main one. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else at the moment that's happening. But yeah, America, Nicholas Pooran and Rakeem Cornwall, really good players playing in that in club cricket tournaments in America is really common and has been for quite some time now. But as far as paying cricketers to play in crap levels of cricket, like it still sort of happens in English cricket, like in club cricket. Overseas players get paid, and sometimes, I live near Beckenham, and they had Stuart Binney one year, right? Like he literally went from the IPL to playing for Beckenham. So I think the Kent League has had a few of those players. It's the Middlesex or the Surrey League. One of those leagues doesn't have overseas players. Then you've got all the leagues up north, Staffordshire, Lancashire, that still really believe in all that sort of stuff. Those are the main ones. You used to get more of it in club cricket in Australia, but to be fair, club cricket in Australia was a really high level. But still, you would certainly get a lot of it. Maybe the most famous one was in Melbourne club cricket, where a guy was embezzling money, allegedly. I don't know where that case is. And he had Chris Gale, Tilakaratne Dilshan, about 4 other Sri Lankan players. I can't even remember, but big name Sri Lankan players all playing for him. So yeah, that hasn't stopped, person. That won't stop. An American Wicket says, what's stopping Ireland or Zimbabwe from scheduling tests with the USA, Canada, Nepal, or Netherlands? Nothing is stopping them scheduling games with them. They won't be classified as tests. They would be classified as first-class games. And I think from a legal perspective, I don't know what the copyright is on the word test, or the trademark, I should say, on the word test. But it would like for Ireland, it would cause issues with the ECB. And they share like a TV rights package, unless that's changed, but they used to. And they have a relationship with the ECB that's quite good. So they probably wouldn't want to do that. Zimbabwe, I don't know if it would matter as much, but also it might cause issues with South Africa. But they can schedule 5-day first-class games. No one could stop them doing that, right? But it probably wouldn't make them any money, would be my guess. Josh says, on CrickPicks episode 65, the game picked an all-time IPL 12 in your absence, and shockingly didn't pick Narayan. Didn't they? Interesting. Which 4 international players would you pick? Narayan, Gale, AB, Dre Ross. Oh, okay, yep. I would pick... Yeah, I would pick Narayan. I would pick AB de Villiers. I would pick Dre Ross. Probably Rashid Khan is the other one off the top of my head. It's a bit unlucky on Gale and Pollard and Malinga. But yeah, I think that's probably how I would go. Wasn't there another Crick Picks, which I think I was on, where Estelle picked... Who did Estelle pick? Samuel Badgery ahead of Narain. Literally picked someone else from his country over him. Don't get me wrong. Samuel Badgery stand until I die. But Richard says, do you rate Steve Smith or Gautam Gambhir? Average of 39 and strike rate of 85, higher in ODIs. I've never really liked Gambhir, but he's a pretty important part of the 2011 team. Who do I rank higher? I've never really thought about it, but I've always thought he was a pretty serviceable one-day player. I think he was a handy test player. I think a lot of his reputation is probably brought down by the fact he wasn't a very good T20 player. He played some good innings, but he wasn't a star. And that's kind of how we saw him towards the end. Where does Sehwag, Tendulkar, Gambhir rank among the best ever Indian ODI top threes? Other top threes I can think of is Rohit, Darwan, Kohli, Gilchrist, Hayden, Ponting, Greenwich, Hayden, Richards, and Roy Bairstow Root. I think it's a step down on most of those just because of the number 3 position. But I don't think it's massively out of that conversation, Rudra. Like, it's not... Like, I might not put it ahead of any of those teams, but I don't think it's a silly question to have asked or anything. Like, I think I can understand your thought process. How would you rate Trevor Goddard? Is he a better batter or bowler? Wanted a better understanding of your thought process evaluating a player, especially with someone who played tests partially in the 1950s. Test numbers to save you having to pull them up. Batting average of 35 over 78 innings at 41 matches, 100. Bowling economy of 1.64, 123 wickets in 75 innings. I think just on that alone, I would say anyone who's averaging mid-30s over 78 innings. How did he play 78 innings? Oh, and bowled 75 innings, yeah. I think anyone who's averaging mid-30s is probably more of an all-rounder than someone who's averaging, 1.7 wickets per game? I think that's pretty low for me. So based on the usage, which is what I look at the most, I'm probably looking at that. I think Goddard's a perfect example of a true all-rounder, as in, I think I might have said this. I can't remember if it was about him, but it was about a player from the 1950s, and I think it was Goddard. He's kind of the bits and pieces player, but in excelsis, in that you're not really losing that much having him in the side. He probably could have bowled more, and maybe his biggest issue was that he just didn't take wickets because he never got hit off the square. I mean, that economy is ridiculous. But yeah, I think I would never worry about whether he's a batter or bowler because he's so well-rounded. I think of him as an all-rounder. And I don't think about many players as an all-rounder. Neil says, with Wood out, Carter's fitness uncertain, Woke's aging, Stokes unlikely to bowl, Jofra probably not returning. What sort of pitches would give England the best chance against India this summer? Flat decks to baseball against Boomer and Co, or result-orientated ones conducive to 80 miles per hour, 80 kilometers an hour. I think if you think we can't take 20 wickets, your best chance is always as a team to make your wickets as good as possible to take 20 wickets, right? It's like when South Africa have a great bowling lineup and they play teams with average bowling lineups, but the wickets are seaming everywhere, sideways. I'm like, is that the right way to go here? Because the other team's going to struggle to get 20 wickets. You're probably not. So I think if you can't take 20 wickets, you would want wickets that would help you with that. How easily do you think they can successfully direct curators at all the venues? It's not been a part of English international culture. Generally, the local boards and local bodies have had much more power when it's come to pitches than anywhere else. So it's not as easy to put that pressure on. They have requested stuff, especially since the start of baseball, but they haven't really forced it through like obviously South Africa is famous for, or India has become famous for. So they'll ask, but my memory of the last Ashes series was they asked and they didn't always get what they wanted. PJ says, what would life be like today if Hitler, Stalin, Chairman Mao, Uncle Kim, and Mussolini were cricket fans? Feel free to discuss other dictators. Do people know that Hitler played cricket, by the way? I don't know anything about Stalin and cricket. And actually, the last 4 of those guys, I don't think I know anything about them in cricket. But Hitler played cricket. And he's on record of saying how much he hated it. He thought it was an effeminate game. And that I think he might have thought something stupid like they shouldn't have had pads and the ball should have had a spike in it, which doesn't even make any sense. How do people follow this guy? Like, if the ball had spikes in it, wouldn't it just get stuck in the ground, idiot? What a great reason to be upset at Hitler. I don't know if them being cricket fans changes anything. I don't want to compare this person 100% to them, only because we might all have our issues with him, but they're slightly different. But Elon Musk is a cricket fan, and I don't know. I don't see, I know a lot of stupid cricket fans. Do you know what I mean? I know a lot of evil cricket fans. I know a lot of arsehole cricket fans. Currently, every time I put out something about the book and we use the word batter and batsman, my God, do we get a lot of very angry, white, red-faced people coming on board. So, I don't know. I don't believe that cricket could have swayed those people. Maybe Mussolini. I mean, I suppose if Kim Jong-il was a cricketer, he would have hit 6 sixes in an over every game he played. So that would have been fun, if nothing else. All right, let's have a quick break here. And then when we come back, we will have more of this kind of thing.
NVPlay helped me make this content. For detailed performance breakdowns of your game using technology and data, contact them today.
Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harsha Bogle and me, so you know it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a 6 from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend. Satchmo says, should Dennis Lee be rated at least equal with McGrath based on having greater variety and on the fact that he influenced other great bowlers? Hadley and Marshall said they took things from him. Imran praised him. No. He did have greater variety. But McGrath didn't need greater variety. Like, I never want to be unfair on bowlers like McGrath, Bumrah, not Bumrah, sorry, Garner, McGrath, Garner. There's someone else I was thinking of as well. Tomo. Because they had one thing that worked for them, and it worked so well, why would you worry about anything else? Influence stuff is a little bit different. I do think the fact that Hadley and Marshall said they took things from him was very important. I don't think that gets him to McGrath's level, though. Like, McGrath's streets ahead of him. But I do think in general, like, I rate me and Dad and Victor Trumper higher based on the fact that they really did change the game around them, right? Like, that's a very important thing to be involved with. And I think you do get a boost from that. I'm not sure that you could say that Lily changed the game. He maybe taught us something about professionalism, and he certainly took it. I think there were 2 kinds of fast bowling. I think there was fast bowling, and then there was skillful fast bowling. And I think you have in Wes Hall and Fred Truman other guys like Lily, but I think Lily perfected it, right? And so you have to give him some credit there, but I don't think that drags him up to like Glenn McGrath's level, because Glenn McGrath was unplayable for a generation and a half, right? Like, Lily wasn't. Just don't think Lily was as good a bowler as Glenn McGrath, and I don't think there's enough there. And as far as I think I'm pretty happy with that. Sandeep, I noticed DK animatedly suggesting field changes and angles to Patidar in the IPL season opener. How far are we from cricket being manager-centric like football? Will we ever? Well, the reason that we can't, Sandeep, is because the managers are not on the field. So we are a mile away from that at the moment. It's my experience working in dugouts, my experience working with cricket teams, my experience as a journalist talking to coaches, they would probably prefer it to be like that. No, it can't be like that. Ayush says, why has cricket declined so much in the West Indies since the 90s? Who are your top 10 fast bowlers of your lifetime? Ayush, dude, I don't even know what my lifetime is. Why has cricket declined so much in the West Indies since the 90s? The West Indies' success is one of the more fascinating things that's ever happened to cricket. And I think you can break it down in this way. Their players were playing in sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes even 4 different locations as professionals while the game was turning global. The vast majority of everyone else would only play overseas when there was a reason to play overseas for your national team. Whereas I think if you go back, the 2 teams that really probably benefited the most from this, and maybe the 3 teams, the 3 best teams in the 80s are New Zealand, Pakistan, and the West Indies, right? Richard Hadley was already becoming a good bowler, but there's no doubt that playing for Notts took him to a whole nother level. Playing as a professional, where he was playing as an amateur back home, took him to a different level, and he carried that New Zealand team. He's not the only one as well. There were other players. John Wright played county cricket. Did Martin Crowe play county cricket? But there was certainly an element of, I think Martin Crowe played. I just can't remember who he played for now. I played for Somerset. That's right. Those guys used that as a finishing school, right? Pakistan, exactly the same, right? Like many of those Pakistani players were using it as a finishing school. And so you look at someone like Imran Khan, he was like, who would you even compare Imran Khan to? Like he was a wild fast bowler that didn't really know what he was doing. He wasn't even always that fast. He had batting talent, but it never came through. Playing in England, and he played in university cricket as well, but playing in England certainly played a huge part in him becoming the Imran Khan that he was. And that's how the Pakistan team was kind of built on the back of him before Wagon and Wasim come in. And then the West Indies. The West Indies players from what? The 1950s onwards. Club cricket, league cricket, county cricket. There's a time when there are 2 players available, so they've got 2 of them in. One will play in the second. So a lot of West Indian players played second 11 cricket. So they're playing as professionals for 6 months of the year. Then they're going and playing for the West Indies. Then that same crop of players also goes and plays in World Series cricket as professionals. There's also elements of, playing in other places occasionally for money as well. The West Indies as a group of 15 or 18 players, and you could actually go out to about 25, if you count people like Sylvester Clarke and Roddy Eswick and random guys who just dominated county cricket or league cricket somewhere and didn't even get close to the West Indies side. They were professionalized in a way that no one else in the sport was. So I think a big part of the West Indian cricket was the professionalization. Who's the next team who actually professionalizes their team correctly? Australia. Who's the next team that takes over the world? I don't think these are accidents. I think there's problems with West Indies cricket when it comes to talent development, when it comes to professionalism, when it comes to the fact that they're all different countries. It's very hard for them to get money. So if you look at what Australia did, Australia just went, great, we're just going to have academies, right? We're going to have a national academy, and then everyone's going to have a state academy. The national academy is going to be paid by the government. The state academies are going to be paid individually, and we've got 6, 7 different academies, and we can rotate players through. And that is how Australia builds the network that they do. It's really hard to do that in the West Indies. So let's say you're a great player from Grenada, right? There's a bit of national pride in being a great player from Grenada and going on to play for the West Indies. But if you're an Olympian from Grenada, they build a stadium with your name on it. The stadium is called after the guy whose name I've now forgotten. But the runner, was he a hurdler? I think he was a hurdler. I've been in his stadium. Adityan says, was fascinated by the Rahane Narone partnership from a couple of days back. Rahane smacks pace and Ryan kills spin. But at one point, Rahane was trying to force the spinners to the boundary. How do players think about it? Take a single and maximize their own spin hitting, superpower, or try hit sixes when you're feeling on song? It's usually just conversations. There's a really good one. I think they mic'd up David Warner and he was batting with Aaron Finch. And the conversations were absolutely... And the Cricket Australia, I think it was Cricket Australia or Channel 7 or Fox, whoever it was, released an edited version of it. And you really understood the kind of conversations and how you work for each other. If you're batting with someone, and I've done this before, like if I know I'm better at something than the other guy, I'll try and take it. But if the other guy's like, actually, I think I could take this person down, then you back them. I think that's a fair thing to be able to do. And if it doesn't work, you probably don't do it next time. And they wouldn't have batted together that much. They would have batted together a little bit though, wouldn't they? Nadika says, how do you balance work and life when your work is something you love? Deep. Look, I would be writing every single day if I wasn't working in cricket. I love writing. You know, I love working on creative stuff and making stuff, right? And I also love cricket. So for me, it's not a big deal. I probably have less what people would say free time than other people. But that's okay, because if I'm watching a cricket game or doing some research on cricket, like that is like a version of a hobby as well at times. I just break from it when it's causing me issues, right? Maybe that's the best way of doing it when it comes down to it. You know, my family comes first, my work comes second. So in my head, it's an easy delineation. I probably don't have, as I said, as much, I don't know, hobby time, me time, downtime as other people, but also don't really need it. It's just not how I am built. So for me, you know, watching Namibia versus Canada at 10 o'clock at night because there's a game on, I'm still enjoying that. I might be learning some cricket stuff as well. I might just be enjoying it. KG, why hasn't cricket found a solution for dew yet? E.g. balls that can be coated with some hydrophobic chemical. What possible solutions have you heard of? I haven't heard of any. I'd like this ball's being coated with hydrophobic chemical. Hydrophobic. I would assume it just reacts badly to the leather. But if you want to know the real reason why most things go wrong in cricket, KG, it's as simple as this. No one's in charge, so there's no one there to spend the money. That's why the IPL could actually solve a lot of problems in cricket, because there are people in charge and they do have the money. The ICC is not in it. Why would the ICC worry about this? And who would they be taking the money off? Sri Lanka don't want to invest in this. Actually, Sri Lanka's a bad example. They might. Zimbabwe don't want to invest in this. Right? Like most countries don't care unless it's directly affecting their revenue. And it's probably not. It's probably not even affecting Sri Lanka's revenue, even if they get due more often. MF Jim says, The Boys Club by Michael Warner about AFL corruption and this kind of exclusiveness due to what high school you went to and old money fascinates me. Cricket is such an old boys game. What would some big moments of this influence coming? What would be some big moments of this influence coming through? The creation of the ICC as empire, the fact that South Africa got test status because English people like having holidays there, and there are a bunch of English people there already. Maybe ditto for the West Indies. New Zealand getting test status because 2 teams had come in and they weren't predominantly white. Pakistan not getting test status instantly, but Canada almost getting test status. Having it as an empire-led sport. What else is old boys? The whole veto thing when Australia and England had veto power at the ICC. I don't know. I could go on forever, MF Jim. I mean, there's a lot, dude. Ruja says, what are some of the most theoretically good but never really worked bowling lineups? This isn't the best example, but India around 2011, Zahir Khan, Ishant Sharma, Harbhajan Singh, and Praveen Kumar, Srisanth. If you look back on it, and I want to get my years right, but I think I'm right in saying this. There was a period when Australia had Siddle, Johnson, Hilfenhaus, and Lyon. Did they have all four of them? Maybe not. I mean, Hilfenhaus is one of the big lost talents in cricket because by the time he came, we saw this guy bowling at 86 miles per hour outswing. And when he was younger, he was bowling 90 miles an hour outswing. We very rarely saw it. Siddle was much more exciting when he was young. Johnson was, if Johnson was the Johnson he was when he was older, that lineup's different. So that's one that comes to mind. I'm trying to think of another one. Oh, New Zealand. Chris Martin, Ian O'Brien, Kyle Mills, Dan Vettori. Those are good bowlers. And they had backups as well. Like, I always thought that bowling lineup was far better. And then it just never, I don't know how often they played together. Chris Martin never took enough wickets. Ian O'Brien was injured in and out. Kyle Mills, I don't even know if what was Kyle Mills' overall record in Test cricket? I'm not sure. I think he might be like Chris Martin. Or was he slightly better? And maybe Dan Vettori was fading by that stage. Is that fair to say? In Test cricket, 19 matches, 44 wickets at 33. Yeah, I think Kyle Mills was a lot better bowler than that. That Jacob Oram is their all-rounder too, right? Did they have Doug Bracewell? No, maybe not. Bracewell might not have been bowling at that time. That one comes to mind. I'm trying to think of other teams. I mean, West Indies didn't make enough of Holder, Roach, Gabriel. Who's their fourth? They had someone else as well. So they had a couple of really good bowling lineups, which occasionally was plucky, but probably didn't do enough. Malinga and Murali never really combined with Vas, and they could have used Harath. I mean, that one, I suppose, is cheating Rudra because he wasn't in the side, but he was around. Trying to think if there's any South African ones are usually pretty good. England, side bottom, Swan, Anderson, Broad, Flintoff? They were good. That's a pretty good lineup. Sandeep, I tried reading on late swing, but couldn't understand when and how. Okay. Late swing is kind of a myth. It's not a myth. It exists. But really what we mean by late swing is that there are some bowlers. I can bowl massive outswing, Sandeep. But when I bowl massive outswing, from the minute the ball leaves my hand, it's starting to swing, right? So I can get it to curve like a banana, right? Really slow, big curves. I've bowled to people who just can't hit it, who are good cricketers, just because it's such a ridiculous style of bowling. And what I never managed to do is do what my dad can do. My dad can swing the ball sideways, but my dad can bowl it, what you would say, they've got a term in baseball, isn't it? Is it keep it in the barrel or something? But basically, you keep it dead straight for as long as possible, and then it starts to swing. So there is a difference. It's not really late swing, but what it means is, I think it's when you perfect the wrist position, you have the ability for the ball to come out straight for longer and then start to swing. Sometimes it's things you can't handle as well. Like sometimes you'll see bowlers who are swinging the ball, but by the time it's swinging, it's past the batter. But if you swing the ball out of your hand, there's so many cues towards the batter. It doesn't mean you still can't beat them. But yeah, essentially, the longer you can keep the ball going dead straight, the better. But how it's done, I've been told it's by wrist position, but clearly I couldn't work it out. PJ says, if the Saudi slam finally kills off ODI cricket, will countries still continue to play domestic list A professional cricket, or will they instead extend their domestic T20 and first-class cricket? I don't know if the Saudi thing will kill it off, but let's just say it dies anyway, right? To go with your general point there. I think if it dies overall, I think list A cricket dies with it. List A cricket, it's struggling. There is an element of, I don't know if T20 cricket helps people as much in ODI cricket or Test cricket. But I do think there's an element that first-class cricket and list A cricket does actually help people in T20 cricket far more. Just the length of time you're out there and the more problems you have to solve and, you know, different things you have to go up against. You got a great bowler, you're not going to face them for 8 balls, right? You might face them for 20 balls, 25 balls. Oh, so I actually think there are things that can really, really help from that perspective, from ODI cricket or list A cricket. But once it's no longer, I'm going to say, is financially viable the best way of putting it? Like, I'm trying to think of a better way, but once it's no longer useful, I don't see how we keep around that format of the game anymore. All right, quick break, and I'll come back with the super chats here on the Wagon Wheel. This is brought to you by Cricket 8. They are a new player in the game trying to educate fans on what is really happening in cricket. We have a partnership with them where we host live watch-alongs, do podcasts, and write articles. If you want to know what is really happening with our game, visit cricket8.com. If you make any content, Minvo Pro is the tool for you. Take your long format content and cut it and slice it for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Minvo.pro now. All right, welcome back. Let's get to these. Almost pressed end stream there by accident. Okay. Anmol says, doesn't dew only form with 100% humidity? No. I think every now and again, I'll be watching a game and someone will send me the rules of dew and like, oh, you need to be this temperature, then you need to drop to this temperature. I mean, there was dew on the ground in last night when I was out, walking out to my office in the UK. It wasn't 100% humidity. So I can't give you the full example of it, but all I can say is this: a lot of the meteorology advice I've received over the years just doesn't hold up. Would be the best way of putting it. I don't want to have a go at those people, but it just doesn't. Times when I'm told it definitely will be dew, there's no dew. Times when I'm told it's impossible for dew, there is dew. Shrikant says, how would you rate these batsmen in red ball cricket? Stuart Law, Brad Hodge, Michael Bevan, Matthew Elliott, Greg Blewett. Oh, that's tough for me because Matthew Elliott was one of my heroes as a kid. But I actually think Michael Bevan was probably better in red ball cricket. There's a chapter in my book, and I talk about Michael Bevan not making it as a test player. The Art of Batting, out 8th of May. Oh, wait. Oh, Ezekiel just came out. I'm just going to take a quick break and see why there is a child in my backyard. I'll be back in one moment. South Africa did not choke. In 1906, South Africa needed 284 to win. They'd only passed 100 in half their test innings at that point. At 105 for 6, it seemed impossible. They fought back but lost another flurry, leaving 45 to win with 1 wicket in hand. At the crease was Dave Norse, who was a capable batter, and he was joined by Percy Sherwell, the only debutant captain keeper and number 11 in Test cricket history. And these two were doing it. A huge crowd in South Africa cheered on every single run. With 8 left, Sherwell edged between slips for 4. Straight after, Norse ran a 3. England bowled 3 dots. All they needed was 1 wicket to tie. Instead, a leg side full toss, boundary, game over. This was Test cricket's first. All right. Sorry, it's just in the middle of that super chat. I don't know if Ruck should hit this button, but it's disappeared on me. I think it's Michael Bevan, Matthew Elliott, Brad Hodge, Stuart Law, Greg Blewett is the order of those players that I would go. Matthew Elliott and Michael Bevan, their ceilings were just so high, and there were varying reasons why they didn't make it. Brad Hodge, I thought, was fantastic, and also could have been a test player, was probably just the wrong kind of player at the wrong time. Stuart Law, I always thought was really good, but I never thought he was a great test player. And Greg Blewett, I thought he was the worst red ball guy out of all those guys, but at one stage he was the dude. Genie says, I had this question about Siraj and his type of bowler and why he can't be consistent in his approach, lengths, lines, and bowling style. Why is he a rhythm bowler, and how do you mitigate that? You can't mitigate it, because if you could stop it, it would just stop. I think what you're really talking about is there are certain bowlers who you could throw them a ball on a random day at any stage, and they would be able to come in and hit a line and length really comfortably because they are grooved and they understand exactly what they're doing and it works for them. And there are other bowlers who just can't find that. I think it's as simple as that. There isn't, and yet their best ball. So it might be Stuart Broad or it might be Mohamed Siraj. Their best ball is still obviously top-level international bowling. And the difference between Broad and Siraj is that Broad could go back to just being tall, and Siraj doesn't really have that. So when he doesn't have his rhythm, he doesn't really have a way of pulling it back, is maybe the best way of describing that. Genius Genie says, also an NBA question too, if you could take it, if time permits. What's up with the Lakers defense suddenly, and why did they keep leaking buckets and losing their leads? I don't watch the Lakers. Lakers. Shrikant says, greatest bowlers to have never played Test cricket post 1900. Padmakar Shivalkar and Rajinder Goel come to mind. Glenn Chappell, Matthew Innes, two that instantly come to mind for me. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. If there's someone who got in, I mean, there's probably guys who got injured really early on in their life. You know, in their career when you thought, oh, okay. I tell you what, if you're just talking about talent or potential, Billy Stanlake would probably be on that list as well. I'm trying to think if there's a spinner in the West Indies, but surely most of them have played a couple of Test matches in their time. Is there a Sri Lankan spinner with like 1 billion wickets too? Or am I misremembering that? Jack says, is Hazelwood the second best all-format bowler since the advent of T20s? Or is there another pacer or spinner who's better? Since the advent of T20s, no, because you would have Steyn and Bumrah ahead of him. Third is interesting. Yeah, third, you're getting me excited with third. Because it's not Boovy, is it? Is it still possibly Stark just because he's been better in white ball for longer? Oh, is it Mohammad Shami? So yeah, he's in the conversation, Jack, but I don't think he's right at the top for me. Anyway, that's it. What's this show called? Let's call it Wagon Wheel. Ezekiel's in the room now. What do you want to come say hi? No. He's shaking his head no. It's never good on a podcast, is it? That's a Gross Point Blank joke, by the way. Anyway, thank you very much to everyone who is involved in this. We're having to move the podcast around a little bit. As I said, I'm doing the audio book. There's also IPL stuff, and I've been doing some other business stuff in the last week. Still trying to get the studio ready and everything else. But thank you for everyone for still popping in for this live. We will be back again. I have absolutely no idea when. I just did a video, which would be interesting to see how it goes down on the main channel, about fielding positions and how much they've changed just in the power play of white ball cricket over the last few years. I'm really interested in this, and I've always been interested in the fact that cricket is not interested in this. It's a lot of interested for you, but sometimes there's a lot of interest.
You want to swing wildly at the internet like you've got the new pill in your hand, but you keep getting dead battered. Find the movement you want with NordVPN. They are our protection against terrifying cyber threats and wide-battered geo-blocks. NordVPN will help you get through any rights restrictions so you can watch all the cricket you want. We aren't always happy with the wickets we're on. Sometimes we need a change. NordVPN can switch your virtual location so your IP address is ready to cash in. So if you need to get around the internet's rules, or I suppose in our case laws, select NordVPN. They can help you watch a game on a cheaper stream in another country. Give NordVPN the ball and let them penetrate all your vast internet issues. Because if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. You can also receive a 20-gigabyte daily data voucher. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a big hitter is coming for you at nordvpn.com/KIMBER right now.